show today, we have Brian Behlendorf, Executive Director of Hyperledger, talking to us about insights into the identity space and explaining to the credit unions why CUledger is such a big deal across the globe. So check it out. Hey everybody, Mike Lawson here with CU Broadcast. Welcome to our show. And on today's program, we're going to be talking a little digital identity and CUledger, distributed ledger, all sorts of really cool stuff with Mr. Brian Behlendorf from Hyperledger. You're the Executive Director of Hyperledger. Cool.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Yep.
Hey, so we're talking about the insights into identity space and explain credit unions why CUledger, this cool new blockchain distributed ledger QSO, is a big deal across the globe. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about Hyperledger. Give us a quick 411 on what you guys do.
So we're about 3 years old. We are part of the Linux Foundation, and the Linux Foundation is a industry consortium that's about 16, 17 years old that has been really at the heart of initially just the Linux ecosystem. And Linux is an open source operating system that is built by developers from hundreds of different companies, thousands of different companies really, working together to build common technology, common infrastructure. The Linux Foundation expanded beyond just that operating system into cloud computing, software-defined networking, all these other technology domains, and for the last 3 years into the blockchain space.
Gotcha.
And so at Hyperledger, we've pulled together a consortium of over 250 different organizations, mostly for-profit companies, but some nonprofits, some government agencies, others, to collaboratively build open source software for distributed ledgers and smart contract systems, which are sometimes known as blockchain technology.
Indeed. Very cool stuff. I mean, this is like, I mean, it used to be kind of science fiction type stuff, but now this is reality. This is happening right now before our eyes, right? All this. There's
a lot that's really coming into practice now. I mean, we took a very different approach from a lot of the rest of the blockchain space, which was very focused on cryptocurrencies and tokens and get-rich-quick schemes. I'm sorry, I don't mean to go there, but okay. We focused very pragmatically on what does it mean to build a distributed ledger between a collection of organizations, a consortium, if you will, and then build interesting stuff on top of that. And so we've been just very hands-on. Let's build code. Let's see what works, and let's let 1,000 flowers bloom.
Right on, and this is what exactly is going on as well. So, and one of the items that distributed ledger is effective in is digital identity, or in this case, decentralized identities. Can you tell us? Okay, give us what's the connection here with distributed ledger and digital identity? Can you give us the connection there and how it all works?
Yeah. So, for 25 years, I've been tracking on different digital identity systems on the internet. And they've all tended to devolve into login with Facebook, login with Twitter, right? Mm-hmm. And this model of your everything interesting about you and your ability to prove who you are and those interesting things about you living on a remote server somewhere that you access with a name and password kind of breaks down. It breaks down when you realize, well, sometimes I don't just want to be known as a Facebook user, or sometimes I don't want to just be known by my driver's license. I want to be known as a collection of these interesting things of who I am, and I want some degree of independence from any given company, right? If I get a diploma from a college, I should be able to prove that that diploma is valid, even if that college goes out of business, right? Or if I have a driver's license and I use it to, get entry into a website to go buy alcohol, it shouldn't be the case that the state knows who I am when I log in. So everyone's been trying to get to a concept around decentralized digital identity, a way to give these attestations and these claims and these essentially, certificates to people that they could hold in a wallet and present in different circumstances and decide, okay, here I'm going to give my driver's license for this, but I actually don't want to reveal my entire birth date. All they need to know is that I'm over the age of 21. Right. Or here I'm applying for a job. They want to see my diploma, sure, but does the school really need to know that which job I'm applying for? Those sorts of things. To get to that point, we needed a different approach to how we build directories and databases, rather than going to a central directory somewhere, because after all, who runs that directory? Who can be trusted to run it? And who's going to stick around even as venture capital disappears or companies go to business, that sort of thing. We needed to move to a more decentralized approach. And blockchain technology is really the one technology that's emerged over the last 10 years that gets us a shot at being able to build these decentralized, distributed databases, decentralized, distributed business processes that allow us not to store all of our data in the cloud because there's a lot of personal information in that data, but to store public keys and signatures and hashes, basically enough to allow us to prove the integrity of our digital identity. When I present a diploma to you, you can test to make sure it's a valid diploma based on the keys and signatures stored in this ledger, even if that school went out of business. And that's where the blockchain technology plays a role.
Okay, cool. And so in this case, financial institutions or credit unions, why are they so interested in this type of stuff? I know this is the obvious question, but I want to hear your take on it.
And I've had to become a quasi expert in so many different domains since taking this job. It's funny. I'm definitely not an expert in the financial industry or credit unions, but everything about credit to me seems to be about understanding whether the subject applying for a loan or a mortgage or any sort of credit is a good risk. Right. And getting to know if somebody's a good risk involves all these kind of formal processes, KYC, AML sorts of things, looking at somebody's history. Have you made payments on time? Are you, do you have a job? Like all these sorts of things that are about proving things about you to somebody who's evaluating you in order to get a loan. Right. And that, so all of that has to do with identity. All of that has to do with these things that hang off of your different attributes of who you are. And parties that are trying to figure out if you're a good risk want to not only know the good stuff, they want to know the bad stuff too, right? And so these two systems are this industry needs this technology in a way that go beyond even the way that most sectors do.
Indeed, I totally agree with you. So why is this type of identity important why is it important right now? Is it keeping some stuff private, keeping, like you were alluding to before? It's like, okay, why do they need to know my birthday, but this is who I am? Or what do they know about my college, or what, that type of stuff. So it's kind of like they can learn the specific information that they need, not the extraneous stuff. But if they need it, they can get to it, I guess. So why is this important today? What's the importance of it today?
Well, in 2019, we're now, a couple years into, it's funny. A friend of mine said, if data is the new oil, then data breaches are the new oil spill, right? And, the data breaches are happening with such frequency that we're almost becoming, immune to it, right? We're almost coming to assume that if our data is out there, it's going to get breached and lost. And, I've had to get new credit card numbers 3 times in the last year. Just because of identity theft and credit card numbers being breached and that sort of thing. I had my phone card SIM jacked last year as well, which was definitely no fun. And all of this stuff, is causing people out there to go, is there too much information out there about me? How do I get a handle on it? How do I actually manage it? And those who aren't getting cynical about it are starting to say, are there ways technology can help us better manage how our information is managed out there, and get our hands around it and treat it more like property, more like my property as much as it is the property of somebody else's. So I think there's this kind of populist revolt now against this kind of big data kind of movement, or a populist response, let's at least put it that way, where people are starting to question whether by default companies they've never met or don't know about should have so much information about them and are collecting it. And you're seeing that in the GDPR, right? The regulatory response in Europe, which has certain echoes here in the United States, and California and other states are starting to talk about much stronger privacy regulations. Perhaps even the feds are getting into that. And so there's an increased amount of interest, but a real lack of understanding, is it a policy problem or is it a technology problem? And what I think we're getting to is it's both, but that the policy needs better technologies in order to implement what the policy wants. GDPR isn't really possible to be enforced well until there's a wave of technologies that make it possible for average consumers to understand who knows what about me and how do I manage that, and how do I get a better handle on it. Likewise, we're seeing certain industries like the healthcare industry, and to some degree the finance industry, stymied by the lack of interoperability when it comes to medical records or financial records or the like. And a self-sovereign ID approach, and a blockchain-based digital identity approach gives us a much better basis to start to talk about joint ownership of records between individuals and institutions, and the ability for an individual to say, right, I'm going to take my healthcare history from one provider, one clinic, one health insurance plan, and pivot it with me as the fulcrum for that lever, the center point of that pivot, over to sharing this data with my new doctor, my new health plan, or the new financial institution I want to start to work with. And so this is really why this kind of technology is so right for this time.
Gotcha. Yeah, love the descriptions there. Now, let's get to CUledger here. And now this is one of the organizations that's kind of leading the charge, especially in the financial services industry, in the digital identity space. So with MyCUID, can you tell us about this organization's significance worldwide right now? Because I mean, they're certainly making a splash domestically, and they're starting to worldwide. So can you give us a quick summary on what their significance is right now?
So in a world of self-sovereign identity or user-centric identity, there's still going to be, people are still going to have, they're going to have a wallet that has interesting information about them. But where does that wallet live itself, right? And certainly you're going to want that wallet to be portable in the same way that, say, your web browser, password manager is portable, right, between websites, or even if you decided to stop using one browser and start using another, you'd expect to be able to move that. But you're still going to need in this space people who are custodians, people who are companies that build relationships with end users that hold either the keys or hold these different claims for you on your behalf and make it easy to present those to others. And so this is kind of what CUledger is building with MyCUID, and trying to get some harmonization out there around the standards and around the certification of providers into a space like this, and try to bring a huge degree of interoperability between the different credit union systems around the world, so that you don't end up with one wallet that you use with one set of financial institutions and a separate wallet or a separate experience with a whole different set. We want to make this as, I think, as integrated and as personal and as simple as we can for end.
How do we get financial institutions to buy into the significance of this digital or decentralized identity for consumers? How do we get them? I guess education is the key. That's step one. And then tell them how important this is, especially on a security level as well. So what's your take on that next step?
Sure. Well, so the most successful internet technologies tend to have three different components to them. One is a standards body that is trying to organize what's the interoperability that we can get between different systems by coming to a common agreement on how they should talk to each other. And we're now several years down a path of talking about some common foundational standards in this space, like DIDs, DKMS, lots and lots of acronyms I can throw at you. But the good news is it feels like for the first time since I've been tracking this space, the internet industry is really converging. Identity industry is converging on a common set of identity standards. So that's the good news. The second is widespread production quality technology, like the ability to actually run this stuff and run it at scale. And that's the part that Hyperledger has been focusing on. Specifically within our greenhouse, as we call it, we have 12 different technology initiatives, but one of those is called Hyperledger Indy. And Hyperledger Indy is a toolkit for building these kinds of self-sovereign identity systems. And it's the toolkit that's underlying CUledger and a lot of the other work going on in this space. And it's open source software. Anybody can run it. The development of it is done publicly, so people know what's going on. There's no backdoors. There's no hidden agenda. No single vendor that's profiting from this, at the expense of everyone else. So all that's really good. And then the third piece is what you might think of as governance bodies. In the domain name system, we have that with an organization called ICANN, which manages kind of the way that name servers work. And in this space, we have a couple of these emerging organizations, but the one that's really taking the charge here is something called Sovereign, the Sovereign Foundation, SOVRIN. And there's room for others, but these are basically consortia that are trying to organize how, the governance model for how identity information gets published to these networks, and then, what it means to be on that network. What are the responsibilities of organizations that are on, right? So these three orgs now all exist, and we're all charging ahead, and we're all talking to each other, and there's lots of people on each other's boards and things like that. And so we're really well coordinated. And then, of course, none of this would matter if there weren't technology companies out there that could help translate all these great intentions and budgets and things into running systems. And so that's where you see companies like Evernym, which is a small young company, a startup, so to speak, that's been around for a few years, all the way to companies like IBM, getting into this space, and others like Microsoft and Accenture. And the good news is, even the big boys are converging onto these common standards, and there's lots of room for more startups in this space. Lots of technology work to be done and education work to be done. And with all this supportive infrastructure, now we can bring on the industries like the credit union industry or the education industry. We're going to be publishing all these diplomas, right? Or others who'll be consumers of this information. But basically, all the supportive infrastructure work is there or very close to being there.
Do you see this as kind of a blockbuster video, moment, whereas if people don't adopt this type of stuff, they're going to get left behind? Or where do you see, is this kind of something pivotal like this? Or what's your take on that?
This feels like a 5 or 10 year transformation of how digital identity works on the internet. It's not overnight, for sure, because there's a lot of consumer behavior that will evolve, and the pace of that evolution is hard to predict ahead of time. Sometimes it really depends on, can we get the equivalent of the web browser in front of people, right? When web browsers first came along, they're very clunky and slow and hard to figure out, and they evolved pretty quickly, and then they kind of plateaued for a while in the late 90s, and then when Mozilla Firefox came along, it kind of pushed the envelope further and that sort of thing. And now browsers are everyone. It's like stepping into your car. You know how to drive, right? A browser, and it works on your behalf. And I think a key question is, how quickly can we get consumers to adopt this kind of technology and master it, understand how to use it as instinctively as they know how to use a car, which is kind of a complex thing and very dangerous, but we know how to teach each other how to drive cars, and now we drive them every day, right? And a similar type of transformation I think will have to happen on the consumer side, and so the key question is how easy and natural and fluid.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of people out there, sometimes me included, are still trying to wrap their head around this whole digital identity model, that you can kind of take your identity with you anywhere, I guess, and use it anywhere, airlines, healthcare, finance, all that type of stuff. And it's all right there, and it's super secure as well. So there's so many pluses here. I can't wait. I'm getting goosebumps right now, Brian. I can't wait to see it really, I don't know, in a practical use, in an everyday practical use, because it's going to be a game changer for sure. At least in my opinion, it is.
Yeah, me too. That's it's one thing that gets me up every morning is knowing just the importance of what we're building here, and I think that gravity is perceived by a lot of people in this space. Like, we have not very many chances to get it right, so let's bring our A game to it.
You got that right. All right, I'm going to let you get back to work because you got some important things to do. I appreciate your time, Brian. And to wrap up, where can we find out more information? Where can folks get more information on digital identity, distributed ledger? Obviously, CUledger.com is a great place to go to. Are there any other places to go and get some more information on this stuff?
At hyperledger.org, we've got a lot of information there about all the different blockchain related stuff we do, a lot of which goes beyond digital identity, but we're seeing identity play a key role in a lot of it. So at Hyperledger, it's a project called Indy, INDY, that is most critical there. And then CUledger, the CUledger website has a ton of information about this kind of new space, and I think we'll be playing a key role in educating that industry.
Well, exciting times for sure, Brian, and I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat with us for a few minutes. So, full speed ahead, sir. Sounds like it.